Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Severance Season 1. So I will just say spoilers for the season. I did review the first 3 episodes individually, if I can speak, back when it first launched. And I watched 4 and 5 at the time, and I was really liking the show, but things get in the way. I really wanted to go back and watch the rest, so I actually watched the 4 remaining episodes that I hadn't seen, not quite back to back, but over the last day, basically, just chipping away through them. And obviously wanted to talk about it. I mean, I wasn't interested in going back and redoing the episodes and doing one at a time, but I really wanted to watch the rest of the season because I like the show a lot. It may be, it slowed down a little bit in the middle because, I mean, episode 3 was wonderful, and I think 4 was as well, but I mean, it's been since I watched 4 and 5, so my recollection of some specific details is a little bit muddy now, but the final little run of 3 episodes, the last 3 episodes of the season, were pretty exceptional, and so much of what this show did over season 1, with the nature of who you are when you split yourself into a second person that doesn't remember all of the details of your life, and it's just kind of an unfiltered version of you in some way, or a heavily filtered version, depending on which way you look at it. It was fascinating. The core kind of goal of the last few episodes, which was the discovery that there's a way to trigger the inner personality remotely, as kind of like a protocol, and the way they revealed that as well, because Dylan we hadn't seen any of outside as far as I can remember. So to reveal that with him, like in his closet with Milchick and the kid running in, and him, Dylan arguably was the least developed of the 4 characters that are in the department, right? Because obviously Mark's our main character, we get tons of him. Helly get tons of stuff, not in the outside world, obviously, and there's a reason for that because there were some big reveals to go along with that. But she got so much good stuff, but the idea that she was rebelling and trying to convince her outie to quit the job and stop this from happening, she gets so much. And then Irving, he has had this romance blossoming with Christopher Walken's character, Bert, and that's been very kind of sweet, and there's been a lot there to sort of process and sort of like you'll wonder what these characters are like outside. I did ponder at one point as it was developing more towards the end of the season. I was thinking, is Irving, like, is he openly gay on the outside, or is this something that he's discovered in here, or something, is sort of never opening up about who he is, kind of partly why he wanted to be severed in the first place, because he wanted to forget about those struggles in his life. There was questions that were kind of ruminating in my head as I was going through things. So yeah, the final episode is like everyone but Dylan. Dylan's the one sort of flipping the switches for everyone else, but the other 3 characters all, because the Ennies all get to experience a slice of life in the outside, and that's the entire last episode. The cliffhanger at the end of the penultimate episode was perfect for that. The way it was like the switches get flipped, and it's like, oh, you have to wait for the finale to see how they all react in the real world, and what are we revealing here. And there was some reveals. There was a big reveal before that. Like I said, the last 3 episodes were really good. It's funny because episode 7 I thought had like a perfect ending moment, which was the moment that Irving gets motivated to join the party, right? Because he's not really into this rebellion quite as much. But when he realized that Bert's retiring and he's effectively, this version of Bert is dying because he's never going to exist again, that's when he comes in and he says, let's burn this place to the ground. I thought it was going to go to the credits there. I thought when it cut to black on that moment, that was going to be your ending, because it felt like a perfect ending. But of course it had like the shocking reveal like 2 minutes later, which was an even bigger deal, which I'll talk about in a second. Just on the direction and the style, there was a lot of great moments in some of these episodes. I think it was episode 6 where they all 4 of them decide to like sort of rebel and walk back to Bert's department. That had a lot of style in it. The dancing, Mitchick's dancing scene where the music and dance like experience like reward in episode 7. The one that ends with Dylan attacking him. the fluid motion of him dancing, the way the camera was moving around him was a surreal little slice of things. I don't know what you call it, but it was perfect. It was this perfect just encapsulation of the weirdness of all this, and the just how constructed and artificial everything is here. It was with a smile on his face. It was just perfect. Which has kind of been Mitchell's thing, is he's kind of been that smiling character all season. But yeah, let's talk about some of the big things towards the end of the show that kind of shape what the season is now ultimately in hindsight. Is so Mark's wife. Let's talk about Mark's wife. Mark's wife being a reveal that it's someone we know and that she's still alive. I think if you told me back when I was watching the first couple episodes, or when I knew the premise of the show, or sometime early on, if you had told me that his wife is not really dead and she's one of the characters at Lumen, Miss Casey specifically, right? Turns out, and all of a sudden it became clear why this very relatively minor character is played by a pretty solid actress who is not like a huge name per se, especially compared to Turturro and Walken and actors like that in the show. But she's a pretty accomplished TV actress who's capable of doing really great roles. I've seen her be great, so it kind of felt like, it's a fairly small role for her, but it's nice to see her. So the reveal that she's actually now all of a sudden way more important is like, okay, I get why they cast someone good in that role now. This makes sense. But if you told me back at the start that this was going to be a reveal, I don't think I would have liked it. I think I would have said that sounds a bit, the wife's not really dead. I don't think I would have enjoyed it. I think it worked though by the time we got there, and it's one of those things where once you're already invested, and they've done such a great job of making you care about the characters, and I think the fact that I never even considered that it was going to be a reveal, and maybe that was a little bit of naivety on my part, or maybe it was the fact that I had taken the break and came back to it, so I hadn't really been thinking about it for some time. So when I watched 6 and then went straight into 7 pretty much, I didn't really have much time to process the thought of that. But I didn't even necessarily see a reveal coming until the few seconds before, where clearly they were about to reveal what the wife looked like, and it was clear, this is going to be someone we know. This is going to be a face we recognize. I didn't hate it. And if you told me what it was at the start, I think I might have done, but I think I didn't, because immediately I got excited about the next time inner Mark gets to speak to Miss Casey, which happens the very next episode. I was excited about that. I think the very ending of the finale, where inner Mark, just before he goes back, to sleep, as it were, yells out, "She's alive." That was a very exciting cliffhanger to leave it on. The idea that he gets just that sentence out, no context, he doesn't have time for anything else. He just yells out those 2 words. And his sister, Devon, knowing what she's just found out from him, may not necessarily jump to just believing it outright, but she's going to have enough doubt now and enough sneaking suspicions and things that, I am very intrigued as to where they go with this. And also why she was believed to be dead. Is this just as simple as the company's first experiments in making this technology work was them kidnapping people and making them look like they were dead, so they could, because when they fire her, quote unquote, they send her back to the research lab or the experiment lab, whatever they call it. And that hallway she walked down is very much what Irvin was painting over and over in his real self when we see him. I think it's interesting that all the characters seem like, obviously Mark we've been following all season. We know his ins and outs on the outside pretty much. But the other characters, I think it's very interesting that Dylan actually is just the family man, which is almost kind of a swerve in a way, and that he's the one who's always dropping F-bombs. He's the one who's always just out for himself. So to find out he's the one with we don't know if he's got a wife currently. Maybe he's a single dad, but he probably has a wife. He only has 3 kids, and he's got a more traditional life. It's kind of an interesting swerve. The other 3 characters, though, or the 2 that we've sort of found out about, is that Irving seems to be researching Lumen. He finds the trunk. Irving finds the trunk with the research and goes to find Bert. He's knocking on the door at the end, all that stuff. but he's clearly looking into things, and it makes me wonder, like, is he only started doing this since he was working there, or was he already researching things, and that's why he got the job in the first place 7 years ago? I don't know. But actually, which makes me remember, he's been working there for 7 years, so I guess like Mark's wife couldn't be like an early experiment, but maybe this is just something they do. Is occasionally they'll get people who can be easily presumed dead, so they can experiment on people as guinea pigs for things. But yeah, their first scene together, in her final wellness like meeting or whatever you call it, was really interesting. That they sort of like, he does care about her, and he's got chemistry with her, and it also puts into reflection every other like romantic kind of entanglement he's getting into, with the women on the outside, but also with Helly. Helly kisses him before they go, and what they have does feel quite genuine. And I actually was thinking, like she says at one point, like, what if we're all assholes on the outside? There's no question about me. And it kind of sets you up for, she's an Egan, right? So that's the big thing, is that she took this role kind of as a rite of passage, because she's the boss's daughter, she's part of this family line, and this is the family history we've all been hearing about like the whole season. And she's going through this gala, and she's almost going to get a chance. Well, she gets a little bit of a chance. She starts saying the truth at the end, but we know she's about to be turned off, or switch back to outie. But the idea that one of them is actually kind of the villain, in a sense, that she's the enemy, and it's the one who was the most, like, from the first episode, the one who was hell-bent in leaving, the one who hated this the most, and is almost inspired in a lot of ways the others to kind of question things to some extent. The real her in the outside is the villain, is the one who is telling the public, no, we should vote for this and say this is something we can do at every company because it's humane, and look at how happy I am, and all these photos they've got of her, and they've only got ones of her smiling. Yeah, the attempted suicide's missing. Yeah, that's not there, which is one of the best moments early in the season. I don't know if I talked about that. I don't know if that was episode 3 or 4, but that was a great episode. So that was great stuff. So yeah, there's this propaganda to say, hey, we can do this to people, and we're going to lie. Because, it's clear that she knows what Irene tried to do. Her father, when we meet him, he clearly knows what she tried to do, and that they're unhappy. But that's not what they're going to do. They're going to sell this lie. They're going to sell that this is humane and wonderful and a great way to run a business and work. So, it's very villainous, and right away from a science fiction perspective, you have this clear thing where this is about, and as I've been saying this the whole season, but now that it's been kind of said out loud to a point, this is very much just the idea of a corporation not treating their workers like human, and the idea that they can treat them even worse when they can't remember how they're being treated and things like that. All wonderful stuff. But that brings us to a very fascinating question with Ellie, and the idea of who's the real Ellie, right? Will the real Ellie please stand up? Helly, sorry, I said Ellie there. Helly, because it got me thinking of a wonderful little film you might have heard of called Total Recall, in which, and spoilers, I guess, for Total Recall if you've never seen it, but Arnold, we find out later on, like, the real guy is a villain, right? But he had his mind wiped. But the new version, who is free from all of his history, turns out is actually a really good guy. He's kind of a hero. And it got me thinking about that with Helly. This idea that without the upbringing from her father, brainwashing her into the family tree and like, what we're doing for the world in the future, the idea that there's a good person in there, and that good person's allowed to exist because she's free of everything else, that is a fascinating idea. I've talked a lot, I think, in the previous reviews and about Mark and how that feeling he has on the outside of missing his wife is still kind of in there. He doesn't understand what it is or why he has it. So that's why he feels the need to, look after others, to look after Helly. And I thought Mark and Helly's moments where they're sort of saying, oh, you're easy to pretend to care about, I thought it was a really sweet scene. Made me want to root for them. And now we know his real wife's in there. So we have this idea of outer Mark having his wife, and that's his love of his life. And then inner Mark's got Helly that he's kind of forming this attachment to. And it really brings up this question of like the rights of the people on the inside who are effectively new people. But then we get to explore all these things where at your core, what makes you you, right? Is it just the experiences, or is there fundamentals that are true no matter what? I thought the performances were great. Like Adam Scott, the moment he became any Mark, in front of what was her name, Coble. She like the way just like you could recognize it was the inner Mark immediately. The way he sort of like talks, the way his mouth moves. Like I know that's also talking, but the way he kind of scrunches it up a little bit when he's inner Mark, and he just immediately started doing it. And it was kind of like when you watch Christopher Reeve play Superman, and he switches between Superman and Clark Kent. Even if he's not in the outfit, there's just a difference to the way he holds himself. There's a difference to the way he talks. It's really well done. I really appreciated that in the performance. I think they all did fine with it, but I think he stuck it. There's a reason why he's the lead, I suppose, right? That's why they got him for the lead, because he's very good. Yeah, another performance moment I love. So he eventually gets to tell his sister that he's any Mark, and he's explaining how they're feeling inside and that something needs to happen. And she's taking it in, she's believing him. Obviously, she's horrified when she realizes that Coble is the neighbor, and her what's the correct term? Not a nanny, yeah, the nurse, whatever she's pretending to be. Obviously, she's horrified when she realizes that it's her that has her baby. But even the moment that really impressed me from an acting perspective, that I really got excited about, and sort of like enjoying the story kind of way, it was as soon as he says, "Why is Miss Coble here?" And she's like, "Who? My boss? Why is she here?" And her reaction to just that line, where she's like confused but kind of getting it, like, "Wait a minute, what? Your boss is at this party? Like your boss secretly is here?" Like at that moment, I loved that kind of realization. There's a lot of stuff came out here, which clearly is going to make season 2 feel differently to start with. Like obviously they're going to be punished in some way for what they've done here. A lot of questions. Maybe they'll even try to wipe their memories, but what can they do to his sister? I mean, they're quite powerful, and clearly they've kidnapped and or fake people's deaths and stuff. So it's not like they're above doing some shady shit. But I'm what is the fallout to this? I'm fascinated by because Coble does get fired for lying about the attempted suicide, but she kind of proves her worth here at the end, so they might hire her back by her catching this leak, as it were, and trying to help plug it. I mean, if she hadn't found out that Mark was like any Mark, then Medchick might never have gotten to the security room to stop the beam, if you whatever, and as a result they might have had like another half hour or something to just flesh out a lot of these things. Helly could have finished their speech and like made it very clear what was going on. Admittedly, that would have probably given it away. The jig would have been up at that point, I suppose. But Mark may have gotten to ask a few more questions, and they did really tease you a lot in the finale with him like almost talking to his sister, but his sister like, "Oh, I need to take care of the baby, come back." And then likewise talking to the brother-in-law. And again, that's another interesting little bit, right, is the idea that Mark on some level does appreciate his brother-in-law's writing. And maybe it's just a case of, okay, yeah, the Mark that read it and got a lot out of it is the Mark that's never been able to read another book before. So it's really mind-blowing to him. But it was actually kind of sweet having him encourage his brother. It was actually kind of a genuine little moment because he meant it. And finding out that he's got a wife and all the rest of it, and also the idea that she's called Miss Casey is really smart in hindsight, because that's them hiding her first name. Because we knew she was named Gemma, right? At least we found out before the final episode, anyway, or before we knew who she was. Photo wise, like before we knew what she looked like, and the reveal happened, we knew her name was Gemma by that point. So that that would have given it away. So the idea of calling her Miss Casey, and I would presume Casey is her maiden name, or maybe it's just a made up name, it doesn't really matter, but the idea being that like it's not like it, because it would have been interesting, I suppose, if he did know she was called Gemma, any Mark, and then as soon as they said Gemma, he's like, huh, you know. But maybe that would be a bit too breadcrumby, I suppose, as opposed to just the sudden hit. But yeah, like I think a lot of this stuff, because the build up to this was great as well. Like them like coming up with this plan, meeting their quotas so they would get the reward to do it. Like all of it was very exciting. It had that sort of heist feel to it, where I genuinely wasn't sure how long it was going to last. I thought it may be like 5 minutes at the end of the penultimate episode as opposed to being the full finale. I'm glad it was that way though. It made every bit of it feel juicy. It felt like we're with them, not quite in real time, but it almost was like that because it got the full episode to really explore it. If anything, it was probably shorter than the episode was because like all the different characters stuff was probably happening concurrently, as opposed to the way it was spread out. I appreciated Dylan getting the family because I thought that the other characters between Irving having the Burt stuff and that kind of been an interesting thing to explore about him finding someone in there, and obviously he sees that he's already got a partner on the outside at the end. Helly with all our stuff, obviously Mark's been the most fleshed out because he's the main character. I thought Dylan, like being the one to see that he's got a kid, like immediately, like just catapulted him to being like, okay, you're all four of you now are rich with story. All four of you have different, interesting things to explore, and they're also distinct as well, which is great. So, I guess one of the big questions I would have get into a season 2 is how coincidental is it that Mark ended up working where his wife is in Severance? Because it is a pretty big coincidence, and certainly it doesn't seem like Outie Mark knew or was trying to intentionally find her because he didn't know. So, but we'd be curious to see how that goes. Obviously, he met the woman who used to do the implants, and she kills the head of security guy. That was like a couple episodes before the end, and that was kind of a big deal. And he was hiding throwing out his clothes and whatever. And that stuff was good. But it was like that was like the end of 6, getting into the start of 7. But like 7 was really like for me, like this batch of episodes I watched, like once we sort of established that someone could be seen, or so someone could like be triggered to go back to their innie on the outside, it was like, okay, well, we have to use this, we have to do something exciting with this. Obviously the other thing we want now eventually would be the opposite, right? We'd want to have the outies go into, maybe not all at the same time, because that would kind of in a way defeat the point, but like have one of them be the outie with all the innies. And kind of like, probably Mark, because he's the one that makes the most sense. He's the one that we know the most about, and he's the one that would want to see his wife. Fascinated by the fallout of everything that we saw here. I suppose I have to mention I said how good the dance was with Mitchik when like the disco like lights are on and he's just sort of dancing around the room. There's another dance I need to mention which was a bit weirder. So the reward that Dylan kind of sneaks out of to go and do all this in the penultimate episode is like he gets waffles and it's okay, that's nice. So many of the rewards in here are based about food, but then he like he's told to sit in the bed and there's like a flogger like there, and he puts on this big silly mask, and then in walk 4 dancers, and they're all wearing these silly masks, but they're otherwise wearing very erotic attire. He has some stockings, some lingerie, some sexy gloves or whatever. They're all very like erotic-y, right? But except these big goofy masks. But they do this dance. And he ducks out, so I don't know if there was going to be any more to it, or if that was the end of it anyway. Presumably, if he was meant to be there for another hour, there probably was going to be more. Was he going to actually flog them? But was there some sort of weird kinky reward that goes with this? That definitely was a bit weird, and they never answered, of course, like the baby goats, which were like one of the departments is raising goats. Why? Certainly, like how long have they been trying to perfect this technology? Because obviously this family's been doing stuff for a long time. Their company goes back like many generations. So I wonder, how long has the dream been to use this type of technology? Have they been trying to perfect this for for like a century, that was from the initial inception of it, and like it's only, you know, in the recent decades that they've really sort of hit the working function of it. And I do wonder, like, the way they're like teasing the mystery of what this company actually does and what their end game is with all this, you know, beyond just like selling this like Severance style employment techniques to like the world. I do wonder, like, how sci-fi are we going with this, like, in their intentions, like how evil in their intentions are we going exactly? Because it does feel, you know, there's been enough like reveals and twists and turns at this point that it definitely feels like a show that's built around a lot of layers and it's got more to reveal. Because this was definitely not the end of the story, you know. I heard that season 2 got renewed before I'd watched the back half of it, and now that I've watched the show, I'm like really happy there's going to be more, because it was an excellent first season. I think all of these science fiction ideas that came out of just the relative, I mean, obviously it's complex to like sit down and really nail the details, but it's simple enough in essence, right? Is that you have a place of work where you've separated your personalities, so there's just a work personality and then a non-work, like the rest of your life personality. And the idea being that you don't have to remember all the hours you spend working, but then the moral implications of this version of you that their whole life is just to work for you. That's kind of cruel. You're gonna be cruel to yourself, even though you're making your choice for yourself. At a certain point, at what, you know, is that a different person that you're punishing and putting through effective slavery. So that's you know, that's one of the big things that comes out of this. These like questions from science fiction, but that's one of the first ones that come out of this whole thing, almost immediately. Is like, is the person in there a real person? Do they have any kind of right? Should they? And the more you watch the show, it feels like they kind of should. Like, they're scared. They want to know. Like, watching Dylan want to know what his kid's name is. You know, the fact that he's seen his son but he'll never get to see him again is like horrific. You know, I said that back in the early episodes, that, you know, once you start to see what Helly's feeling and going through, it's like, this is horrific what they're doing to her, what her outer version is doing to her. And now her outer version is like staunch, no, you're staying in there. Now makes sense because she's like one of the evil family. she's a villain. So like, but yeah, all the science fiction questions, the idea of exploring like why the characters have chosen to go through this for different reasons. With Mark, it's this especially fascinating thing of dealing with loss, but can you actually get over it if you can't remember it, to actually process it and go through the grieving process? You know, there's a great little joke actually when he's on another date with the other character whose name I can't remember. But he's on a date with her, I think it's episode 6-ish, and she walks into kind of this moment where she says, "Oh, you can't just, you know, separate that part of yourself." When you know, when she's talking about, you know, because he's talking about his dead wife and he's apologizing because, is it weird that I'm talking about my dead wife on a date? And she's like, no, you can't like separate. She's a part of you. You know, this is not like a divorce where you're clinging to an ex. This is someone you loved who died. You can't just cut that part of you out. And he kind of smiles like, well, actually, I kind of did. I kind of did in many ways. And I mean, it's a funny little joke, but it's actually like a nice little on the nose kind of idea of what the show is exploring. Is, you know, they took that and made it literal. This idea that you know, corporations and bosses don't want you to like bring any of your outside life into work and just be there with your sole purpose being doing the best job possible and nothing else matters. You know, that's in there. Exploring just all these ideas. It's so rich with them, and they did a good job naturally bringing a lot of them out. And some of them I was thinking about, you know, before they actually said them aloud, and that's good. It means that it's rich, and it means that it's got me thinking. And when the show brings them up, it feels like vindication is maybe not the right word, but it feels like it's, you know, it's like, oh, it's you know, it's on my wavelength. It's the show is rewarding me for thinking about how it can use its premise, and it's still surprising me in many ways. It's still surprising me with reveals about his wife. It's still surprising me with new things it's introducing, but it's a very good so far. Season 1 has been a very good relationship between the show and the audience, and by the audience I mean me, as far as provoking my mind to think about the concepts, making me think about possibilities, and then actually bringing some of those up in the show. Some of the lines that Helly has, in these later episodes, it's kind of vocalizing some of the things that I was saying when I saw her do some of the early stuff, when she was being frustrated and wanted to leave. And I was talking about, it being miserable, it being torture, it being kind of like neglectful of like her outer version and things like that. She kind of vocalizes some of that as the season went on. And when they're more sort of part of a team, which is actually something I really want to praise as well, is that I kind of love that by the end of the season, it actually did feel like the four of them were kind of this little misfit family of like characters who were very disjointed early on, but by the time that they all come on board at the end of episode 7, it feels like, no, they're a team now. They're a unified force of some kind, and it makes me want to root for them all the more. And the happy endings here, or the potential happy endings down the line, are kind of wild to think about, because I think for some characters, successful integration, which the renegade implant lady, she said that like Petey died, but he died because he didn't follow her like post operation advice. She seems to think that it would actually be okay, and he would have like been fine if he'd actually followed her orders. So that sets up the idea that one day, maybe Mark can integrate and like have the memories will merge, be both again. And for him, that feels maybe healthier. But for someone like Helly, it's kind of like, well, anyway, Helly, like, it's kind of awful. And at least from what the glimpses we've had, she seems that way. And given, like, she seems to be on board with the company line and her father's wishes and all that stuff. So you almost don't want outy Helly to have any existence. You want inner Helly to be the one who takes control and just gets to live forever. That may be, obviously, like not feasible. It might not be something that's on the table, but I think that's what you kind of naturally are maybe rooting for a little bit if you think about it by the end of the season. So yeah, no, I think the science fiction of this show, it's a great concept, and I don't think the show has let the concept down. It's quirkiness, it's kind of very specifically stylized music score with the piano, the set design in the white hallways, and even when Mitchik was running down the hallways to get to the security room in the final episode, there was like this like motion to it, the way it was sort of like the camera was tracking back and it was tracking with him as he was turning a couple of corners. It had this weird like maze like but very right angled energy to it that just made it feel like they're in a maze, and it's felt like that whenever they've been in the hallways, really, but like it really felt it there because there was a lot of speed to it as it was running. It's really kind of teased the company and the family and the idea of like this villainous entity, and now that we know this, and it's hard to imagine that they're going to let them keep these memories if they have a choice, but like I do kind of I guess part of me cannot wait for them to like reconvene and like share this information. But of course, like why would they let them do that? Like that's the question, right? And that does present a little bit of an issue, because I would say if they can't wipe their memories, you would think maybe they'll shift them all off to different departments so they can't intermingle anymore. That could be a possibility, and we could see what happens from there. I think the risk of them wiping their memories would be that it may be a little frustrating trying to build up to one of them remembering again, for it to sort of, it may feel like we've reset the status quo a little bit too much in that sense. So I don't know what the setup for season 2 is. I have no reason to doubt them. I have no reason to think that they're going to do something that'll mess it up. But it does put them in this bit of a corner here where I'm not sure how they're going to react to it. I mean, maybe they intentionally keep them together to try to see how this unfolds, because they're trying to study like why this has happened, how can they prevent it in the future, that kind of thing. Maybe they're going to try to treat it as a not a social experiment, but like just an experiment, I guess. It's just a straight up experiment. Yeah, I liked it a lot. Oh, that's one of the other things that was introduced in the season as well, is so the other pregnant woman that Devin met at the birthing retreat place, she runs into her again, and she has no memory of her, and she named the kid something different than what she said she was going to. and that kind of gets Devon's minds going, right? And it's kind of more or less confirmed. She doesn't say it outright, but she's actually, because her husband's one of the, the politicians or one of the people voting as to whether to let this severance stuff to continue and expand. She's at this gala where Helly's going to make this speech. And it was, I think it was already heavily implied. Like, we understood what was going on here, but she kind of confirms it with a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge that she basically didn't want to actually go through the pregnancy. So she created, she went through Severance to create, for lack of a better term in any, to just go through pregnancy. Whether or not that was the whole 9 months or just like the scarier, more painful parts towards the end, I don't know. I'm sure they'll probably expand on this. But the idea that this technology is being abused by people in power for other things they just don't want to go through. And at a certain point, like, what is humanity going to be if people just, like, segregate their own personalities to not have to do the thing? Like, are people going to do severance just so they don't have to wash the dishes? Just so they don't have to, like, go through anything that they find unpleasant? And effectively, if you're doing that, then this inner version of yourself that you're creating to do all these unwanted tasks has this miserable, horrible existence. And it's a very interesting potential, like, kind of weird civil war that could brew out of this, where a lot of the innies might go to war with their outies. Now, obviously, some of them, like Mark, seems reasonable enough and was even going to quit. He said that. So now he might even choose not to quit to help his innie. But wouldn't that be fascinating? Wouldn't it be fascinating if Mark was going to quit, but then his sister convinces him not to, or at least what she tells him convinces him not to? The idea being that he can't just let his innie die. That he has to see this through and save his innie. Isn't that not wonderful? Isn't that not a fascinating? If not him, then one of the others. Like, the idea that they can't just leave because that would be killing, effectively, another person or a part of themselves, and that would be cruel to do. If someone making that choice out of empathy, I think would be a wonderful, like, direction or thing to happen in the near future of the show. And it would be an interesting motivation as well as to why he doesn't just not go back when he finds out stuff. Like, the idea that, no, he's going to do it for inner Mark, because he deserves to either reintegrate, because obviously now outer Mark knows that might be possible, and maybe he's going to go through with it. And I suspect that that's what outer Mark's plot's going to be next season, is that he's going to actually try and do this. It feels like a very likely possibility, but that idea, that's why he doesn't just run. Why he doesn't just quit the job and never goes back is because, well, also the wife. the wife thing may actually also be quite convincing, so maybe that'll overrule it in a weird way, and I won't get my beautifully nuanced, like, empathy-filled, like, choice. Like, because what I love about that choice, again, it's something that science fiction lets happen, because this choice that he could potentially make to save his alternate self, because it's the humane thing to do, that can only happen via science fiction and via a concept like this. And that's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it wonderful, and, like, why it's so exciting to explore these ideas. And then you say, what does that actually represent then in terms of the real world, in terms of, what sort of message are we getting from that? What's it saying? Well, it's saying that, well, in some level we have to save ourselves. In some level, like, him making the choice to save himself now, if he does make that choice, is the choice that he wasn't making when he, like, couldn't deal with his wife's death and he went to Severance and he just drinks himself. Every time he opens the bottle and gets drunk to numb the pain, that's him not saving himself. So this would be him choosing to save himself. So much potential. I cannot wait for season 2, which I should be reviewing every single episode of. So hopefully you've enjoyed my thoughts on the season. I will see you soon. Head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV to support us over there, or hit the super thanks button below the video. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?